Hello everyone. This video is part 2 of a quick little series where we're designing and developing load animations in Figma and then in VS Code. In this video, we're going to be developing the animations using a bit of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. We're going to be having a loading screen animation, an expanding navbar, and a text wipe effect. Let's hop straight into it. All right, so I've just set up a tiny bit of code for our very first animation. We can check it out here. I've just set up a super simple navbar with some links, and then the header, we have our background image, and then all of our text that is absolutely positioned on top of here. Okay, pretty straightforward. So we are going to hop in and start animating, but first we need to create our loading screen. So let's come up here and we'll do a section.loading screen. Then we're going to need to add a div of logo container so that we can center it later inside of loading screen. We're going to add our image with an src of logo SVG. And then we're also going to add an H3 and we're going to call this logo text. And in our H3, we're just going to type bubble because that's our branding. Come over here underneath all of our current CSS and start adding some new stuff. So our loading screen, we're going to select that first. And we want to have a position of fixed. Let's set top to 0 and left to 0 so that we don't have any spacing issues. Then we're going to set our Z index straight away so we don't run into problems. We'll go with 10. We want it to sit on top of everything. We'll add a background color too of black. And then we're also going to do display flex, and that is so that we can center this container in the middle of our loading screen. So we'll go display flex. And before I forget, we also need to add some dimensions to it. So let's do a width of 100 view width and a height of 100 view height, just like so. Great, we can see it showing up here. Now it is taking up our entire screen. We need to center this though, so let's come back over here. For flex, we're going to do align items center, and we'll do justify content also center. And that'll get everything right in the center. Now, we don't actually want this to be one on top of the other. We want the logo to be right beside our text. So let's do that next. In order to do that, we're going to come in here and select our logo container. And we are also going to set it to a display of flex. Okay. We'll also set a small gap in there. I'm not sure exactly how big, but let's start with 10 pixels for right now. Now, our logo SVG is quite large. We want to make it a little smaller. So we'll come in here and select logo container. And this is just selecting the image. You could also add a class to this image right here and then just select it. That would accomplish the same thing. All right, so for our image, let's try a width of maybe 10%. Good, that looks good. Now, if you'll notice, this isn't actually centered. It is off to the left right now. And that is because our container is a little wide. So let's center everything within our logo container by doing, justify content center as well. And that will bring everything directly into the center. And before we hop into any JavaScript, I want to set one more thing, this opacity to 0, okay? And so that's going to make our element here disappear. And we're going to animate that in with JavaScript. So let's come over here to our app.js. And if you've never used JavaScript before, please don't be worried. So first off, we're going to set up a constant. And let's name this preloader. And we'll do a GSAP.timeline, okay? And we'll set paused to true. Let's come over here and write preloader.to, okay? So let's select our logo container like so. And then we're going to do a comma and open up some curly braces. And all we're going to do is we're going to set the opacity to 1, and let's set a duration here and add some delay. So just type delay and let's set 1 second of delay. So if we come back here, we wait a second and then it appears. Fantastic. Now we want to chain another animation onto this. Just write .2. You don't need to write preloader again. We've already done that. And now we're going to select .loading screen, comma, curly braces, and we want to move it up, okay? And I'm going to use Y% here. We're going to set Y% to -100%. We'll give it a duration of 1, and we can see in the background that it does in fact work. We'll give it a duration of maybe 1.3, and we're going to set our ease to expo in out. And this is important because it is going to give us the same look and feel as to what we were doing with those custom Beziers in Figma. So you can kind of see in the background something's happening. Let's reload and take a look. So it fades in and then boom, slides up just like so. Now that's looking really good already, but we want the things underneath to also slide up. So let's tackle that next. Now, before we do that, I realized that I actually forgot something. We want our nav bar to fade in after everything has slid up. So we could come back into the CSS and set the opacity to 0, absolutely. Or with GSAP, we can do gsap.set and select our nav bar and then just set the opacity to 0. You can also do it in CSS. There are pros and cons, but we won't get into that right now. And then we're going to come in here and do another gsap.set. We're going to select our header spacer this time. So that's what contains the text. Come over here and we're going to do a Y% of 100. Okay. This is going to move our text down. It's 100% of the length of this element. Okay. Not 100% of the viewport. So once that's moved down, we can then animate it up while our loading screen is moving up. So we'll do a .2. We'll select our header spacer. And then we're going to set our Y% back to 0. We'll give it a duration of 1.3. Set our ease to expo in out as well, just like above. And then we're going to come in here and add one more thing. We're going to hit our quotes, and then we're going to hit this back arrow. And this means that this animation here is going to start at the same time as the one above. Normally, it would start right after, but we want them to happen concurrently at the same time. So we set this up, and now if we head over here, reload, look at that, it's looking fantastic. Our very last thing to do is we're going to set one more .2. And this time we're going to grab our nav bar, come in here, set our opacity to 1 now, our duration to 0.3. We don't need an ease per se, and let's take a look at how that is. Fantastic. There you have it for our very first animation. All right, so once again, great. I've coded the next one. Quick little page here. We can take a brief look at the code, not too much going on. We have our blur at the top, a section for our intro text, that is all of this text up here. And then we have all of our cards down here. Pretty simple. So now we're going to be making the nav bar that's going to expand up here when you land on the screen. All right, so the very first thing that we're going to do is let's come down here and just like all the other ones, let's make a section for the nav bar. Next, we're going to make a div inside the section that is, we're going to call nav container. And this is going to be the actual container that has the color and houses all the elements inside it. Next, let's start adding some of our elements. So we'll start with our menu container. This is going to house our menu. So let's get an image for our hamburger menu in here. src/menu png. Then we'll use an h4 and just have it be menu. Come down here and we'll make our logo container. And in it, we're just going to put our logo that we have. So / and logo png. And then for the last section, we're going to have the join container. So let's put that in there. And of course, you can put anything in your nav bar and make it expand like we do. We'll have an image, and we're going to grab this Discord icon here. And then we'll put some text underneath, and we'll say join us. So if we come back, we'll see this obviously does not look very good. So let's hop into some CSS and make it look better. So very first, let's grab our nav bar and make sure to center our nav container that is within our nav bar. So we'll do display flex, and then we'll justify the content to the center. Next up, let's grab our nav container, make it also display of flex. We'll do justify content. This one will be space between, and then we can align the items to the center just for good measure. Fantastic. Next, we are going to grab our join container as well as our menu container. And in it, we are going to do display flex once again. Justify content we don't need, and align items will be centered. Now that is looking a little bit better, but we need to set a width, okay? For the time being, we are going to come in here and set a max width of 500 pixels. We are going to come back and change this later, so I'll write a little note to change later so I don't forget. Now that's not actually going to do anything, so we need to set a width as well. We'll set our width to 100%, and now we can see things are starting to shape up a little bit. Let's come back here. When we select both the join container and the menu container, let's also add a gap of, let's say, 10 pixels. So the icons are a little bit separated. Now it's time to add a background color. So let's come in here and add this. We also need transparency to it. So we'll add 6.1 at the end. And that, as if we click in here, you can see it's dragged the opacity down to here. Next, let's add a border radius as well. We'll do 100 pixels. Then we're gonna add some padding to it. So let's go 10 pixels on top and 30 pixels on the side, and see how that looks better. All right, and the very last thing before we start animating is I'm gonna come in here and add the logo container to this, because we need to add an opacity of 0 here so that we can later animate it in. So we'll see that it is now gone. Awesome, so now we are ready to get started in our app.js. Now this one is gonna be a tiny bit more complicated because we need to get a property. We need to figure out how tall this is so that we can set the width to it so that we can get our circle, okay? So it's actually pretty straightforward. We're gonna use GSAP once again to get that done. Let's set up a constant in here. We'll call it nav height. And we're gonna do gsap.getProperty. And in there, we are going to select our nav container and the property that we want, which is, in this case, the height. And so if we console.log that out, we can see that it's going to return a height for us. And you can see it has in fact returned pixels, 27 in this case, which is great. Now that is honestly the hardest part. The rest of it is pretty simple. Let's set up a const nav anim for our animation. We'll do the same thing as last time, GSAP timeline, and we'll do paused to be true for now. Then let's come down here and we'll have nav anim, and this time we're going to use a from to instead of just a to. And this means that we can set a start position and an end position instead of just an end position. So let's select nav container, and in it, what we're going to do is we'll start with our from condition. So we want to animate from a scale of 0. This is when it shrinks down to a tiny little dot. We'll do from a scale of 0 to a scale of 1. And we'll set that to a duration of 0.8. Next, we're going to do another from to. This time we're going to be selecting the nav container once again. And this time we're going to be animating the max width, okay? So make sure to remember to come back here and change this down to 0 pixels, okay? If you don't change this right here, your animation isn't going to work very well. So now that we've changed that to 0, now that we've done that, we can come back here and set our max width to our nav height, okay? That is the variable we defined up here, and we want them to be the same size. If our width is equal to our height, then we have a circle. Then let's define our to position, and here we're gonna set max width to whatever we had before we change this to 0. So we're gonna set it back to 500 pixels. Let's also set a duration. We'll do 1.3, and here we're gonna use our ease of expo in out. All right, we're looking good. Our last step is to animate in those links. So to do that, we can select them one at a time and change the opacity. That is totally a viable option. But I'm going to show you something that might be a little faster and easier to do. So let's come up here and define a const of lms. And then we're going to create an array. We are going to select then our 3 containers that are fading in. So our menu container, our logo container, and our join container. Then what we can do is we can use GSAP to iterate over them very easily. So just come in here, put in lms, and then put in whatever you want. So in this case, our opacity is going to be 1. We're going to add something new. It's called stagger, okay? Stagger is going to do them one at a time. It's going to take the first one, then the second one, and then the third one. So we'll set our stagger to 0.2, and our duration can be 0.6. The very last thing we need to do down here. So nav anim.play, and don't forget the brackets. Now, if we come over here and reload. All right, so fantastic. We're on to coding. You might need to play with the timings a little bit, but that's number 2 done. Already coded. The coding, the last animation. We have our and images, just like all the other ones, I have a quick screen set up here, and then just the text here. So let's get things started off here by placing our text wipe container into our text container. We're going to call it text wipe. Then let's come over here into our CSS and start styling, because that is all of the HTML that we're going to need. Our text wipe is going to be positioned absolutely. We'll set top to 0 and left also to 0. Our width is going to be 100%, though we are going to come back and change this later. And our height is also going to be 100%. Our background color, I'm going to steal from up there. And as we can see, it is appearing. Now it is quite big, and I don't think I want it quite so large. So instead, let's come back and set the height to 80%. But then we can see the bottom of the text right here. So we'll come back and set our top down 10%. And now that looks fantastic. That is pretty much all the CSS we're going to need. Let's just hop in here and make the opacity of our big text 0 for now. And we'll change our width to be equal to 0% because we'll be animating that in. So now it's just the image and we don't have anything down here. Let's come back over here and start off our JS. We'll start off with the const of wipe and set that equal to GSAP timeline. And we'll set it by default to be paused. Then we can start building out our animation. So wipe.to. We'll grab our text wipe container and set the width of that to 100%. We'll set the duration to be equal to 1, and we will set the ease to be expo.inout. Next up, let's come in here and set a .set. What we need to do is turn our text opaque. So we'll select our big text like so, and just do an opacity of 1. We also need to set our text wipe to the right instead of to the left. It starts on the left and then it's going to finish on the right. So let's select our text wipe. Come in here. In order to do that, we're going to set right to 0. And often this is all you need, but sometimes we also need to set left to auto in order for it to work. Finally, let's select our text wipe one last time. We're going to set the width to 0%. Our duration is going to be 1 again, and our ease will be expo in out. Great, and that should be everything. So if we come down here, we'll do a wipe play. Now, if we refresh the screen, we can see, brilliant. And that is our third animation all done. All right, so those are our 3 animations all done and dusted. If you did enjoy the video, consider subscribing down below. But otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.